Hello Pinkbike, my name's Dan Roberts. As 2025 rolled around, there was more chatter than ever about a new wheel size. And in February this year, we saw the first glimpse that it could actually be real when a photo of a Maxxis Aspen 32-inch wheel tyre was leaked on Instagram. Shortly after that, at the Taipei Cycle Show in March, Maxxis confirmed that that was the case. Up until then, if you'd want to test anything like a 32-inch wheel bike out on the trails, you were having to go to the world of unicycles for tyres and rims. And it was actually the tyres that held up a lot of the meaningful testing, with these unicycle tyres having subpar performance on trail. Maxxis took 6 months to develop this new Aspen, with opening the molds for the tyre itself being the easy part. The tricky bit was rejigging a whole factory's worth of machinery and processes to handle these massive hoops on a factory that was set up for 29-inch wheels. With there now being a viable tyre from Maxxis, it looked like come World Cup cross-country race season, the front row would be dominated by these big wheel machines. Rumours were rife in the off-season of big wheels floating around the forests of Juvisy and Wisconsin. As 2025 progressed and many small frame builders or enthusiasts with welding torches started to create bikes to either show they were on trend or actually testing things, we saw more and more bikes pop up. But it remained eerily quiet on the big brand front. Once the checkered flag was waved in Mont Saint Anne, it was to many people's surprise that we hadn't seen a 32-inch wheel bike line up at a cross-country World Cup. Talking with a lot of industry members, the response is that of a huge game of poker, with everyone with a stake at the table holding their cards very close to their chests. This secretive game was enough for one brand, BMC. As a brand with heavy investment over the years in research and development, they knew full well that theory can only take you so far before you need to create something and go and get it dirty in the woods. So in January of 2025, they started their project based around 32-inch wheel bikes, called Project Fahrenheit. By June, they already had a bike ready and have been testing this ever since. A cumulative push from the marketing and engineering departments, BMC saw massive advantages in showing their cards to the world, and so at the Andorra World Cup this year, they allowed the media to see their bike, not only leaning at the side of the pits, but also out in some of the practice sessions where they were gathering valuable data on a legit racetrack. Even if they might not be the first one to arrive with a production-ready bike for sale, BMC are the first of the big brands to show their cards and show exactly what they've been working on. So, some on-paper dimensions and weights. A 32-inch tyre is 64mm bigger in outside diameter than the same 29-inch tyre. The fork then needs to be 32mm longer in axle to crown to account for the bigger wheel. Those two added together put the bottom of the head tube 64mm higher than on a 29-inch wheel bike with the same travel fork. And that is quite a sore point in the world of XC, with their obsession with aggressive negative rise stems to get racers' hands in the right position. The added weight of a 32-inch wheel, when comparing to a 29 with all the same components, comes in at around 250 grams. Everything added together puts estimate in weight difference between a 29-inch to 32 at somewhere between 600 and 700 grams. While that is an educated guess, there's a hell of a lot of nuances put into that guess due to the longer levers in the frame needed to accommodate the bigger wheels and the changes in stiffness that would bring. So why are we hearing all this chatter of 32-inch wheels in the first place? In theory, bigger wheels offer better rollover, decreased rolling resistance, and an increase in ease of maintaining speed and momentum. They also increase the size of the contact patch with the ground, leading to increased grip. A lot of those traits sound advantageous to mountain bikes in general, not just reserved for XC bikes. The bigger wheels do have downsides though, like increased mass, which is both rotational and unsprung mass, decreased agility, and need to change the gearing to accommodate for the bigger wheels themselves, as well as more restrictions and challenges in packaging them into a frame. So how did BMC create this bike and bring an idea to reality? At their Impact Lab in Grenchen in North Switzerland, BMC have played with many ideas that have made it into some of their production bikes, while having almost twice as many that have never made it outside of these company walls. This 32-inch wheel prototype is one of the products of that Impact Lab. They started with their production-ready 4-stroke, their current XC bike. They chopped out a lot of the tubes so that it could maintain lightweight between lots of the important frame junctions. Those junctions were then CNC'd out of aluminium in-house, many of those parts bolted and glued together. Then they were all assembled into a jig and accurately bonded together to create the prototype in front of me. This is now a commonly used technique in the mountain bike industry to create accurate to CAD prototypes that don't have necessarily a prototype weight as fixed to them. To solve things like bar height, that sensitive fit metric in cross-country racing, BMC thought a little bit outside of the box to mount not only the stem from the top of the head tube, but also from the bottom. BMC engineers actually think that mounting the stem directly to the fork's crown would be a better idea, especially when coupled with the big 32-inch wheels and forks. But this needs a hell of a lot of collaboration from fork manufacturers before it can get off the ground. Given the lack of components ready for 32-inch wheels at this moment, BMC also had to get creative with things like the fork dropouts. They use custom CNC extenders that bolt into the current axle location on the lowers and extend the wheel axle out further, allowing the 32-inch wheel to fit in. This also gave them opportunity to play around with things like fork offset. They tried as far out as 51 millimeters to try and reduce the trail that you get from having a bigger wheel in the bike, but ultimately ended up coming back to the 44 mil that we're using now for a preference in the ride feel that it gave. In the middle, this prototype uses the same dual short link 4-bar system as their normal 4-stroke. This system goes a little bit against the trend in cross-country of flexed pivots to reduce weight by having more priority on suspension performance. Kinematic metrics like anti-squat and leverage ratio were kept pretty damn similar to the 29er, as well as the geometry. Certain things did need to change though, like BB height and chainstay length, to accommodate for the difference in axle height and also simply trying to fit these big wheels into the frame. BMC also uses CNC'd fresh dropouts at the rear, which are modular. This allows them to adapt the chainstay length and play with things like front to rear balance. Right now, the chainstay length is around 448 and it's pretty tight on clearance. They also use a new shock mount that's bonded and bolted into the frame and also offers a couple of positions for adjusting geometry and suspension.
Out of the paint booth and into the forests. These lovely little forests are just a tiny bit higher than BMC's office. And this is where we've been doing all the back-to-back testing. So actually this is the third day on this bike. First day was in some hills a little bit above Freeburg. Normally where I take my trail bike or even enduro bike. This was where I got first impressions on it, this big wheeled machine. And it was really impressive actually. For such short travel and what are essentially inner tubes with the knobs drawn on, it had a lot of grip and capability. Unfortunately, we couldn't do any back-to-back testing that day with a 29er 4-stroke. So that is why we came to BMC's headquarters so we could do this on one of their test loops. It's a lovely little loop actually, about 5.5 minutes long, but it is full of roots. All angles, all sizes of roots that are trying to throw you offline, sap away a little bit of your speed, generally cause you a mischief. Really good representative of an XC loop and really good fun. I'm going to go a little bit slower and then there's less mouth breathing. But yeah, we've been then back to back between this bike and the 4-stroke 29er, and I have to say this bike is impressive. Get through this check bit. There we go. First things from when I jumped on it the first time, definitely the presence of the wheels. They are big. First few little corners, they really dominated the ride feel. But quite quickly you get used to it. There is a sort of laziness, a delay to the way this bike steers. Some of that is to do with simply the size of the wheels and their gyroscopic effect when you want to lean them. The other is to do with the contact patch difference to a 29er. It's bigger, but it's much longer. So when you're trying to steer the bike left to right, you feel that. It also means that the tire pressure window that it works within is a little bit more sensitive. But thankfully these guys have figured that out quite good. We actually did some testing that first day of riding with slightly higher, slightly lower, and it was pretty interesting. And this uphill bit, it just feels less stressed everywhere. Let's play that other slide. When you've got lots of roofs like this, small pattery ones or big chunkier ones, you feel them, but just that bit less compared to the 29er. Okay, tighter, needs a little bit more body English, but really not that much. And after riding the 32 for quite a few laps and then jumping back on the 29er, I was actually quite surprised to feel that the 29er felt nervous. It didn't feel as planted, as stable, as good at just trucking over things, whether you're on the flat pedaling or in a minute where we have a bit of down. Yeah, really nice little trail. Quite representative of what an XC bike needs to do. Like through here, I can just keep pedaling. When we were testing, it was like the 32 could almost grab a harder gear and just motor through it. And just keep pedaling, less disturbances to the front wheel, less to the rear. And then here, we start to point down a little bit. That section was quite important for getting your speed up. Like that one was always a slightly tighter turn. That's maybe where the negatives of these big wheels come out, is you kind of have to be more forethought with your technique. Be that braking, be that cornering. Like here, you can open wide, let it run. It really benefits there. You make a mistake, you do get a little bit more punished on that cornering. But then on this track, everything in between the corners, with all the routes like here, are just so much easier on the big wheels. Like through here, big chunky ones. Can almost stay sat for longer. Just keep on the power. Definitely had the impression riding the 32 that I could almost regain energy on certain sections that I couldn't on the 29. Through here, crazy. Getting good on the brakes. The muddy section. And then this end little steep downhill. Really impressive. It just wants to go. Actually really good fun.
When BMC got in touch with us to ask if we wanted to ride this bike, we bit their arm off. We've heard so much about 32-inch wheels since they were rumoured at the back end of last year, and since we've seen their actual tyres in February and March of this year, that it was a no-brainer to jump and have a go on this bike. Like BMC, speculation and rumours can only go so far before you actually need to get dirty and see how the damn thing rides. And now that we've ridden it and had really positive experiences on it, both on its own and in back-to-back with a 29er 4-stroke, we actually leave with probably more questions than we answered in the first place. Primary amongst those is, will this become the next biggest thing in mountain biking? XC is one thing, and there is still a lot of testing to do to understand how this bike rides for different size riders and how to get the most out of it as a complete system. Fit for riders like myself at 188 centimeters or 6'2" has been great on this L size, and BMC has tested down to riders at about 170 on this bike with not too many problems. They say that fit is also possible in their calculations with 32-inch wheels down to riders of 160 centimeters, but this is one of the extra things that needs to be tested to see if a rider of that height can manhandle and get the benefits of these big wheels like bigger riders can. All of the positive things we've found from riding this bike on its own, and especially in back-to-back with a 29er 4-stroke, leads us to thinking, where else will this wheel size go? There's huge potential for these wheel size in trail bikes. But it opens up the question of where exactly is the tipping point before all of the downsides of the extra weight and reduced agility start to outweigh the benefits of rollover and grip for a trail bike with more aggressive tires, more aggressive rims, and more aggressive forks. Added to that, what happens when the bike has more rear travel and you need more trouser clearance for shorter riders? With wheel stiffness also being a topic for these big wheels, it also opens the question of will there be new wheel standards to try and fix the stiffness issues that we've seen? This question loops us back to maybe why there's so much hesitation from all the brands involved in this big poker game to dive in with both feet first. It's been a great opportunity to ride this bike and get comparisons of how these big wheels ride, and especially in comparison to 29ers. I have to say honestly, I came into this test with a little bit of criticism. Being involved in bike development, I could see how much packaging compromises were involved trying to fit these big wheels and associated big things like forks into the whole system. But I tried to approach these tests with an open mind, and if I liked the bike, I liked the bike, and that was just it. It's actually been great fun riding this bike, especially testing it back to back with 29er. I'm now off to go and discuss with the engineers if I can put this in the back of the van and take it home.